In a significant turn of events for global trade relations, top economic officials from the United States and China convened for high-stakes negotiations in Geneva, marking the first substantial discussion since former President Donald Trump imposed sweeping tariffs on Chinese imports. The outcome of these talks, which began on May 10 and are set to continue, could have far-reaching implications for the world economy, which has been grappling with the effects of escalating trade tensions. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent led the American delegation, while China's Vice Premier Lifeng headed the talks for Beijing. Both sides engaged in discussions that lasted about 8 hours, but a detailed readout of the conversations was not immediately available. President Trump, in a social media post following the first day's meeting, expressed optimism, stating that the discussions were very good and described them as a total reset for U.S. China relations. He emphasized the need for greater access to the Chinese market for American businesses, indicating that great progress had been made. The backdrop of this meeting is marked by the trade war initiated by Trump's administration, which saw tariffs on Chinese goods soar to 145%, prompting retaliatory tariffs from China that reached 125% on U.S. exports. This tit-for-tat escalation has severely disrupted trade flows, leading to a significant reduction in imports and exports between the two nations. Recent data highlighted the toll on the Chinese economy, revealing a 21% drop in exports to the U.S. in April compared to the previous year. While the negotiations have sparked hopes of de-escalation, analysts remain cautious about the prospect of significant breakthroughs. Both the U.S. and China have strong economic and financial interests in de-escalating their trade hostilities, but a durable détente is hardly in the offing, noted Ishwar Prasad, a former director at the International Monetary Fund. The current discussions are expected to focus on understanding each side's objectives and how to navigate the complex landscape of trade negotiations moving forward. Trump's administration has indicated a willingness to reconsider tariff levels, with the president suggesting a reduction to 80%, although this remains significantly high compared to pre-trade war levels. Economic experts warn that even an 80% tariff would still stifle most trade, potentially leading to higher prices for consumers in the U.S. As the National Retail Federation pointed out, the tariffs are already affecting import cargo traffic, which is projected to decline for the first time since 2023. The talks in Geneva are taking place in close proximity to the World Trade Organization, which has been vocal in criticizing the tariff wars and warns that such economic divisions could have dire consequences for global GDP, particularly harming the poorest nations. The organization welcomed the dialogue as a necessary step towards reducing tensions. Both sides have expressed fundamental differences in their approach to the negotiations. China has consistently maintained that the tariffs imposed by the U.S. are illegal and disruptive, refusing to make concessions without a reciprocal reduction in U.S. tariffs. Lifeng, a spokesman for the Chinese embassy in Washington, underscored this stance, stating that genuine dialogue requires equality and mutual respect. As the negotiations progress into their second day, the global community watches closely, aware that the decisions made in Geneva could alter the economic landscape for both countries and beyond. Economists and business leaders alike are concerned that the ongoing trade war could lead to slower economic growth and increased inflation, with consumers feeling the pinch from rising prices and limited product availability. Looking ahead, the outcome of these negotiations remains uncertain, but the willingness of both sides to engage in dialogue is a hopeful sign. An agreement that paves the way for reduced tariffs could signal the beginning of a new era in U.S.-China relations, one that prioritizes cooperation over confrontation. As these high-stakes talks unfold, the world waits to see if a diplomatic resolution can emerge from the complexities of international trade. As global economic tensions mount, U.S. President Donald Trump's negotiating strategy with China has come into sharper focus, particularly during the recent high-stakes tariff discussions taking place in Geneva. The stakes could not be higher, as these talks aim to address the trade war between the world's two largest economies, which has significant implications for global markets and both nations' economies. The negotiations began under the shadow of intensified tariffs imposed by both countries, with Trump recently raising U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods to an alarming 145%. In a surprising twist just before the meetings, Trump hinted via social media at the possibility of reducing these tariffs to 80%. This unconventional tactic, while seemingly self-negotiating, was not entirely unexpected by his trade team. It served to elevate the profile of Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who accompanied U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer to the discussions. However, insiders recognize that any substantial agreement will ultimately hinge on the personal rapport between Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Trump's administration views these talks as part of a broader strategy that is distinct from the numerous other trade negotiations currently underway. Officials have signaled a desire for a mutually beneficial approach that begins with de-escalation before demanding specific actions from China, particularly concerning issues like fentanyl production and the revival of the Phase 1 trade deal initiated in 2020. Greer articulated this outlook, stating, "This talk is about, can we get to a stable place, and maybe that's a foundation for something more?" Despite this optimism, experts caution that the potential for immediate breakthroughs remains low. The backdrop of these negotiations is a complex interplay of trade policies, economic pressures, and geopolitical maneuvering. The existing tariffs have created a quasi-embargo situation that could further destabilize both economies. Recent data suggests that the Chinese economy is particularly vulnerable, and U.S. officials believe that a prolonged trade war could be unsustainable for China. On the other side of the negotiating table, Chinese officials have shown signs of frustration and confusion following a prolonged period of standoff. However, recent outreach efforts from Beijing signal a willingness to engage constructively. This was evident in the presence of Vice Premier Lifeng, who led the Chinese delegation, indicating that Beijing is serious about addressing the issues at hand. The discussions in Geneva, held in the historic Villa Saladin, encapsulate the complexities of modern diplomatic negotiations. As the U.S. and Chinese teams engage in what has been described as a candid discussion, the world watches closely, hoping for even modest progress that could alleviate some of the prevailing economic tensions. Analysts suggest that an agreement to de-escalate tariffs, even if minor, could serve as a positive signal to the global markets. As these talks unfold, they reflect a broader narrative about the evolving nature of international trade and diplomacy under the Trump administration. The president's unpredictable negotiating style remains a wild card that could either facilitate breakthroughs or derail progress at any moment. In the coming days, the outcome of these negotiations will likely depend on the ability of both sides to navigate their differences while keeping the lines of communication open. Observers are acutely aware that the stakes are not just about tariffs but also about the future of global trade relations, as both nations grapple with internal pressures and external challenges. The potential for a new era of cooperation or continued conflict remains precariously balanced. The world awaits to see how this critical chapter in U.S. China relations will unfold, with implications that extend far beyond the negotiating table. The recent high-stakes negotiations between the United States and China mark a pivotal moment in the ongoing trade conflict that has strained relations between the world's largest economies. As U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier Lifeng met in Geneva, hopes were high that these discussions might lead to a de-escalation of the tariffs that have drastically altered the global economic landscape since President Donald Trump imposed sweeping levies on Chinese imports. The talks, which began on Saturday and are set to continue, are the first significant engagement since Trump dramatically raised tariffs on Chinese goods to an unprecedented 145%. In retaliation, China has levied its own tariffs, reaching as high as 125% on American products. This tit-for-tat has not only disrupted trade, which exceeded $660 billion last year, but has also raised alarms about a potential global economic downturn. Trump characterized the initial meeting as very good, expressing optimism about the potential for a total reset in U.S. China relations. He emphasized the need for China to open its markets to American businesses, suggesting that progress had been made in a friendly but constructive manner. Yet analysts remain cautious, noting that while both sides are eager to negotiate, expectations for a significant breakthrough are tempered by the complexity of the issues at hand. The economic implications of the tariffs have already begun to manifest. Recent data revealed a 21% drop in China's exports to the U.S. in April, indicating the tariffs' impact on trade. Additionally, businesses on both sides are bracing for increased costs, with some American companies announcing plans to raise prices to offset the burden of the tariffs. Jonathan Gold, vice president of the National Retail Federation, pointed out that the true effects of these tariffs are starting to emerge, leading to higher prices and reduced availability of goods in American stores. Ishwar Prasad, a former director at the International Monetary Fund's China division, highlighted the critical need for both countries to de-escalate their trade hostilities, arguing that while a durable détente is unlikely in the short term, the initiation of high-level negotiations is a promising step. This sentiment was echoed by others, who noted that both countries are feeling the pressure from their domestic constituencies to reach a resolution. Complicating the negotiations is the broader context of U.S. China relations, which includes issues beyond trade, such as China's role in the global fentanyl crisis. The Trump administration has pressed China for greater action to curb the export of fentanyl precursors, a move that has garnered bipartisan support in the U.S. The timing of these discussions is also significant. With Trump's approval ratings declining amid fears of inflation and recession, he faces mounting pressure to deliver results. The negotiations are taking place against the backdrop of Xi Jinping's recent visit to Moscow, where China is positioning itself as a global leader, a move that may influence its negotiating stance. Despite the challenges, there is a glimmer of hope that both sides can find common ground. Experts suggest that even a modest reduction in tariffs could signal a willingness to engage and potentially pave the way for more comprehensive discussions in the future. Wu Xinbo from Fudan University proposed that scaling back tariffs to around 20%, which were in place before the recent escalation, would represent a significant step forward. As the talks continue, the world watches closely. The outcome could shape not only U.S. China relations but also the trajectory of the global economy. Both sides must navigate the delicate balance of maintaining national pride while seeking a pragmatic resolution. While the road ahead is fraught with obstacles, the willingness to engage in dialogue is a crucial first step toward potentially stabilizing the economic relationship between these two powerhouse nations. In a significant analysis of China's evolving military strategy, the U.S. Army has published a report detailing the People's Liberation Army's PLA approach to combat in large-scale conflicts. This paper, titled "How China Fights in Large-Scale Combat Operations," emerges at a time of heightened tensions in the Indo-Pacific region, raising concerns among U.S. military officials about China's rapidly advancing capabilities and strategic ambitions. According to the report, China's military doctrine is rooted in a concept known as active defense, which merges defensive strategies with offensive operations. This approach allows China to preemptively engage adversaries before they can fully mobilize their forces. The PLA has developed a comprehensive joint counter-intervention complex aimed at deterring, delaying, and defeating enemy forces, the report states, highlighting the integration of advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence, cyber warfare, and electronic warfare systems designed to disrupt enemy operations. The document emphasizes the critical role of ground forces in countering China's strategies, often overshadowed by discussions focused on air and naval capabilities. U.S. experts assert that ground troops are essential for securing key territories, which would enable joint operations in the event of a conflict, particularly concerning Taiwan. The PLA boasts a numerical advantage with over 3 million personnel compared to Taiwan's estimated 1.8 million, although it faces logistical challenges and limited sealift capacity. The report outlines a structured counter-intervention strategy comprising 3 phases: initial actions in the Pacific region and continental U.S. military operations against U.S. and allied forces, and tactical engagements near intervention objectives. Ian Sullivan, Deputy Chief of Staff for the U.S. Army, noted in his foreword to the document that understanding potential adversaries is paramount for readiness. He remarked, "This document will help us fulfill our primary mission, which is to know our potential adversaries and to ensure that our key customers do too." In parallel developments, China is bolstering its defense ties with Africa, hosting nearly 100 military officers from 40 African nations. This initiative aims to foster long-term relationships and influence within the continent, as these officers represent the future leadership of their respective armed forces. Sun Yun, director of the China program at the Stimson Center, commented, "China has a long game and is cultivating ties from the grassroots. This outreach complements China's broader military diplomacy strategy and aligns with President Xi Jinping's commitment to train thousands of African military personnel by 2027. Meanwhile, Taiwan is responding to the increasing military assertiveness of China by planning a substantial military procurement budget, potentially reaching 500 billion new Taiwan dollars, approximately $16.5 billion US, for arms purchases from the U.S. This budget is aimed at enhancing Taiwan's defense capabilities, particularly in light of rising tensions in the Taiwan Strait. The proposed funding seeks to elevate defense spending to 3% of GDP, indicative of Taiwan's commitment to strengthening its military readiness against perceived threats. As the geopolitical landscape continues to evolve, China's advancements in weapon systems, including high-powered microwave HPM technology, further underscore its focus on asymmetric warfare. HPM systems designed to disable enemy electronics represent a significant shift in modern military strategy. The PLA's research and development in this area highlights its ambition to dominate the electromagnetic spectrum and achieve superiority in future conflicts. In conclusion, the developments surrounding China's military strategies and international engagements reveal a comprehensive approach aimed at enhancing its defense posture and expanding its influence globally. As nations like the U.S. and Taiwan react to these shifts, the focus on military readiness and strategic alliances will likely intensify, shaping the security dynamics of the Indo-Pacific region for years to come. The next steps from both sides will be crucial in determining the balance of power in this increasingly complex environment. In an ambitious move to bolster military ties across Africa, China is currently hosting a significant delegation of nearly 100 young and mid-career military officers from 40 African nations. This initiative, which runs until May 15, 2025, aims to enhance defense cooperation and strengthen China's influence on the continent. The officers, hailing from countries including Egypt, Kenya, Mozambique, and Tanzania, will participate in a comprehensive training program centered on understanding the People's Liberation Army's PLA systems and modern military technologies. The strategic importance of this delegation cannot be understated, as it represents a calculated effort by China to cultivate long-lasting relationships with the future leadership of African armed forces. According to Sun Yun, director at the Stimson Center think tank in Washington, the composition of the group, largely consisting of relatively junior officers, is particularly telling. They represent the future pillar of military leadership in African countries, Sun noted, emphasizing that China's outreach is focused on fostering connections from the grassroots level. This marks the fourth iteration of such training programs organized by China's Ministry of National Defense, with the National University of Defense Technology in Changsha serving as a key educational partner. The sessions will not only cover military strategies but also delve into China's military technologies, underscoring a broader goal of enhancing defense capabilities across Africa. As China's defense diplomacy unfolds, the country is concurrently strengthening its economic ties with Switzerland. In a meeting held on May 9, 2025 in Geneva, senior leaders from both nations, including Swiss President Karen Keller-Sutter and Vice President Guy Parmelin, pledged to enhance communication and expedite negotiations aimed at upgrading their free trade agreement. Chinese Vice Premier Lifeng conveyed greetings from Chinese leaders and stressed the importance of collaboration amid a complex international landscape. He emphasized that the 75 years of diplomatic relations between China and Switzerland have fostered increasing economic complementarity, with both countries benefiting from robust trade and investment partnerships. During the meeting, Kellersutter expressed Switzerland's commitment to promoting cultural exchanges and practical cooperation, aiming to elevate bilateral relations to new heights. While these military and economic initiatives showcase China's expanding reach, the geopolitical context is evolving rapidly, particularly in its relations with the European Union. As the EU and China commemorate the 50th anniversary of their diplomatic ties, both sides are seeking to navigate a landscape marked by external pressures and increasing complexity. Recent gestures of goodwill signal a potential thaw in relations that have been strained by political tensions and economic friction. The EU has recognized the importance of strategic autonomy, particularly in light of external pressures from the United States, which has historically sought to limit Chinese investments and technology access. This realization has sparked a new dialogue on enhancing cooperation in trade, climate action, technology, and global governance. Notably, China and the EU's economic interdependence is significant, with trade volumes exceeding €856 billion in 2022 and strong ties in sectors such as electric vehicles and green technology. As both China and the EU explore opportunities for collaboration, they face the reality of a multipolar world where traditional alliances are being redefined. The path forward involves not only boosting investment and reviving cultural exchanges, but also establishing robust dialogue mechanisms to prevent misunderstandings and promote mutual understanding. In conclusion, as China continues to strengthen its military and economic ties across Africa and beyond, the implications of these relationships extend far beyond bilateral cooperation. The evolving dynamics between China, Switzerland, and the EU highlight a broader trend of nations seeking to navigate an increasingly interconnected yet fragmented global landscape. As these partnerships develop, the focus will likely shift toward building a more sustainable cooperative future, where shared challenges can be addressed through dialogue and collaboration rather than confrontation. The world will be watching closely as these strategic relationships unfold, shaping the future of international diplomacy and geopolitical stability.